And welcome to the Aaron Katzman Show. I'm your host, Aaron Katzman, where we speak to you about your life, your money, and your investments. And as always, we're coming to you from the spiritual and soon-to-be financial capital of the world, Jerusalem, Israel. If you like this content, please hit the like button below, like the podcast, and if you've not yet done so, please subscribe to both the podcast and our YouTube channel. We are continuing on with our entrepreneurial series. And today we've got a good one for you. For all you out there who are worried about your health, but are still hungry. It's my pleasure to bring on the show Bayla Haskel, who founded Veg It Out in 2019 after seeing firsthand what the Western diet of highly processed foods, excess sugar, and veggie poor meals is doing to people's health. You can see already that I sort of do the cut screen. I am firsthand example of what those things can do to somebody's health. Bayla has made it her mission not to let people's exhaustion at the end of the long day at work get in the way of eating really good food that is amazing for their bodies. Bayla, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So let's go right in, jump right in. What is Veg It Out?
Sure. So Veg It Out is actually Israel's first subscription food delivery business. The US is jam-packed. This is actually the future of restaurant business, is a subscription food business where people are getting meals delivered to their house on a weekly basis. So they're covered for lunch and dinner by us. Eventually, we want to go into breakfast, snacks, shakes, everything, so that you'll basically be able to have your week covered and know that you have healthy food prepared for you, ready in your fridge to either be warmed up or eaten right away.
So instead of ordering a pizza or burgers for the family, we're going to get a plate of vegetables?
So it's not vegetables, where our food is vegan and plant-based specifically. Okay. But what my goal was from the beginning was to make the food so good that people that consider themselves carnivores, really omnivores, right, would be excited to eat this. And the truth is, when I started the business, I thought that it would be mostly vegans who would be ordering from us. But it actually turns out that most of our customers are not even vegan. But more and more people realize that incorporating some sort of plant-based meals into their week is really, really beneficial. And because the food is so good, so we have curries and we have different Asian types of meals, and tofu that we have is not just the regular kind of spongy, gross tofu. It's crispy and flavorful, and it feels like chicken sometimes. So people are really excited to eat differently than they normally do. But they don't feel like they're eating just, some lettuce and, grass, right? It's very filling and flavorful.
So I even saw on your website that you have arayas, which is a family favorite. We are very much into arayas, and
yeah.
Wow, that's very, very cool. And let me just cut in, just for people who are interested already. It's kosher, right? You've got a certificate?
Yeah, we're in an official industrial level kitchen in Ra'anana, and we have a Tidat Kashrut, which is awesome.
And you deliver where? You deliver all over the country, or sort of just in the center of Israel?
Yeah, so all over in terms of from Jerusalem until Haifa. So not the north, not the south, but from Jerusalem to Haifa, which is a very nice area.
Wow, that's very cool. So you're actually sort of taking, I can't go to you. We don't go to you and sit down, right? You're not a sit-down restaurant, and you're not takeaway. It's an order-based business, right? Where we order like a meal plan we order one meal, we order a week's worth of meals or a day's worth of meals. How does that work exactly?
Sure. So two things on your question. So one is we have no physical location that you can come to, which is, again, very popular in businesses today in the restaurant world. It's called a ghost kitchen, where it doesn't really matter where we're located. We're able to have a kitchen in a very cheap neighborhood because we don't have to have, street, and we don't have to have foot traffic. So first, that's a big part of this business model. But in terms of you as a customer, yeah, you can order, the minimum is 3 meals a week, and you can order as many as you'd like, depending on how many people are in your family. And it's good for the week. Yeah.
So how did you get into this, right? Where did you come up with the idea? Well, give us a little bit about your background and your story and how it led to vegan food.
Sure. So I actually have a background in HiTech. I studied economics and political science, and then I got my MBA in Bar Ilan. Right after I made Aliyah, came here when I was 19, seminary, did that. I grew up in a business family at home. My mom is the CEO of a successful fashion business in the US. My dad was the COO. So I was always around business, always wanted to go into business. And in Israel, HiTech is those are the booming businesses. So straight out of my MBA, I got a student job in Intel. I was there for a few years in business development and then product development. Product development is a very, very cool position for anyone that's looking to eventually become an entrepreneur, start their own business, because product development basically combines business, design, technology, marketing. You're basically in the middle of all the pieces. So that was actually a very cool first job to have here. After Intel, I went to a small startup that was dealing with drones and drone technology. They were all ex-Intel people, so it was very, very cool. And during those times, I was a crazy, crazy workaholic. Again, wanting to start my business eventually, needed to get as much as I could in those years. And I didn't really have time to cook. My husband does more of the shop. He does the supermarket shopping and the laundry and, things like that. I loved cooking always. So that was like my thing in the house, but I didn't have time to do it. So basically while I was in HiTech, between, my 11 p.m. meetings with Silicon Valley and coming home from the office, I would throw a bunch of veggies in the oven, have some sort of rice or grain in the fridge, and I would create these bowls for myself and for my husband for dinner. And that's sort of the kinds of meals I was eating. It was just very quick protein, veggies, carb, with some sort of sauce. And those are the kinds of meals we were eating, very, very quick. While I was in HiTech, actually, I'd bring some of those things for lunch, like whatever was leftovers. And people were always like, wow, that looks so good. I wish I had food like that. And people always were talking about food. They didn't have time to cook food. They were ordering out food, and they wanted to eat more healthily, but they didn't have the time. So all of these things were sort of in the back of my mind. I've always loved good food. I've always loved cooking food, not having time to prepare it. So again, these are just sort of seeds that were planted. In 2000 and I want to say 15 or 14, my father actually became sick with cancer, with leukemia. Right. And like most good millennials, I started researching cancer on the internet because I needed to find out everything I could on the topic. And there was this pop-up. It was a time where there still were pop-ups on the internet. And it was basically this video saying that the cancer industry is a $1 trillion industry and all the money is being invested in cancer, like a cure for cancer and medication for cancer, but there's no money being invested in, or at the time, prevention and preventing us from getting sick. So again, going down the rabbit hole, started finding out that actually the 3 major killers in the world are diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, and realizing this tie-in to the Western diet and how, like I mentioned in what VeggieDow does, is that the Western diet is very high in sugars, processed foods, and veggie poor. So again, these were backgrounds coming together. A big thing for me while I was going through what was happening with my father was, this is really horrible. This is a really, really tough experience. But I'm going to have to take something from this. He actually eventually, he passed away from it. And that was also very, very difficult, a lot of therapy. But again, through that entire time was, okay, I'm a business person and I've learned a lot from all of these things. Like, what am I going to do for it? So now fast forward to, it was 2018, I think, 2019, right before Corona. The startup I was in shut down. And now I'm like, okay, this is either my time to find a new job or finally start my business. So I did a lot of research. Like a good product manager, I did market research and I spoke to 100 people on the phone, trying to find out what are they missing. I knew I wanted to do something with health and food and cooking, but I needed to understand what people's needs were, what were they doing. And the thing that kept coming up again and again was that people are exhausted at the end of the day. They don't have time to cook food for themselves, which again, exhausted, don't have time. But they're ordering out all the time and they want to eat healthier. So after looking at a bunch of different business models, one of the first things that I had thought about doing was something like HelloFresh. Are you familiar with that service in the US?
No.
Or there's Blue Apron. There's a bunch of different businesses doing this business model, which is basically they send you the ingredients and they send you the recipe. Yeah, you've heard that model,
and then you
right?
do it, but you have to do
and then
it.
you do it yourself, right? And so that industry, again, it's a new type of business model, maybe 5 or 6 years out. They get tons of investments. I was looking at the viability of that as a business. And basically what I was finding is that there's a ton of investment money thrown in, VC money thrown into those companies, but they weren't actually viable because there's tons of logistics in terms of like packaging. If we're talking about chicken, but let's say like a chicken breast in an individual like plastic wrap and like this much sauce, like a little bit of sauce for the thing. So, and like half an onion, right? So it actually, there was tons of work on the logistics side. And then on the consumer side, people were getting it, especially people that don't know how to cook. And they were doing it for a few weeks, maybe a few months. And then they were dropping off after a while because they're like, okay, I know how to cook now. It's cheaper for me to go to the supermarket, find a recipe online, do it myself. So while that business model sounded very, very cool, a lot of these companies were starting to shut down and going actually into the ready-made food industry. So the next thing I found was based on the data of talking to people, it was like, they're tired. So even if I send them the ingredients, they still don't want to cook it. They want it ready, but they want it healthy and they want it accessible. So I saw this other business model in the US where you've got ready-made food. It's not about a diet plan. It's not about losing weight. It's not Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers has been around for a very long time. So it wasn't about counting calories. It was just about having good food that's healthy for you. In terms of portions or whatever, you decide how much you're going to eat, how there's no strict rules. But it's accessible and it's easy and you don't really have to think about it. So I actually started the business right when Corona was starting, like as I said, and I did it out of my kitchen. So we're all in lockdown.
So that actually probably was for you a bonanza, right? For most people in the food business, it was terrible, but if you're doing home deliveries, that's probably not bad, right?
No, it was great. It was great. It was as the business person starting out, it was crazy because when I was actually ready to launch, I created the website, I built a Wix website, I'd started an Instagram, I was putting recipes, I was building a following, and I was ready to launch, and I was going to launch with 2 people. I'm very into like lean startup. I don't know if you're familiar with that type of, So I had to make an MVP. So starting with a few people, doing everything myself first with no money, right? No investment yet. And I was about to launch. And that weekend, I found out that my son had Corona and we were going to be in quarantine in a separate room. And I ended up being in quarantine for like a month, which was fine because I built up the thing. But in the end, so I launched it with a few people, and after 6 months, I found a professional kitchen, and we started moving forward. So that was very cool.
Very cool. So I've got a lot to ask you, actually. Your business, I would assume, is very logistic based, right? You're delivering places. You've got a lot of moving parts, right? How are you able sort of to? How many people do you have like on staff, so to speak, and sort of what's your role now as you've been around now for a few years and you're starting to scale? How are you finding that with such a logistic heavy kind of business?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I'm not, like I said, no food background, high tech, sitting in front of a computer all the time, not this kind of logistics. Because I use the lean startup method, and I did everything on a small scale first myself. I was able to sort of build out systems. I got advice from someone right away that whatever I'm doing, even if I'm doing it myself, like cooking in the house or taking orders or customer service, doing deliveries, ordering produce, all those pieces, everything I did, I actually wrote out systems for each thing so that one day when I would hire someone, I would be able to tell them, okay, this is what needs to be done. This is what needs to be done. So in the beginning, right, it was like ordering the produce on Supersalt and cooking the food in my house, creating, okay, these are the things that needs to be cooked. This is how it's done. These are the very, very specific recipes. I did all the deliveries myself. So I'd cook the whole day and then go and deliver them myself. So I was able to see, okay, what kinds of bags, what kinds of containers, no, these containers leak. Okay, these bags are not keeping things cool. Okay, I need cooler bags. Like all of those different things, I learned very, very slowly myself while I was in each piece. And then slowly I brought on people. So first I brought on like a virtual assistant who was helping me with back end things. So there, even though I tried to create a lot of automation on my website, I initially was doing a Wix website. A lot of things were done in Excel. So I brought in a virtual assistant who dealt with, okay, these are the orders coming out. Okay, these are the orders. This is what needs to be made this week. This is where the deliveries go. So all the back end work she ended up doing, you know, email marketing that we were doing, she took that on. I passed basically anything that I wasn't enjoying doing myself anymore, I outsourced to her. The next thing I realized, like it came to after like 2 months, I remember calling my mom like every day, right? My mom's a business person and she's basically my guru, my mentor. So I remember calling her while I was doing deliveries and I'm like, I'm not doing this again. I'm not cooking anymore. This is like, I don't, and it's basically, you know, the saying, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Right.
Like that was, so it was highly, highly pressured. So very quickly, I also started looking for a kitchen that I could outsource to, that they would make the food for me. So that was the next. There was no hiring because the virtual assistant is freelance. The kitchen was outsourced.
And how did you like ensure that the quality control, that the taste was the taste that you wanted?
Yeah, so I worked with them in the beginning. Like I was at the kitchen every week, tasting everything, checking everything. The first kitchen we worked with, it was to a certain level. Now the second kitchen that we're in, we just moved in the summer, and he follows my recipes to a T, measures things with a scale. It's like a very, very professional kitchen. The first one was like a medium. And when I tasted, I'm like, this is my food. It's a huge difference. So the first one was still a test and it wasn't perfect. Like the guy was like, I don't need to follow your recipes. I know how to make a curry. I know how to make a thing. And it was like, you really should just follow it. So there wasn't so much consistency that first time around, but then the second time around, you learn from the mistakes. Okay, how do we make sure that it's going to be? So yeah, that was definitely a difficulty.
Wow. So I want to move to sort of the entrepreneurship side of things right now, because you're really fascinating. We speak to a lot of people, but this is sort of unusual in the fact that you've got what I find, I might even speak personally now with my own business. I'm not going to give up any secrets, but it's very hard for entrepreneurs to give up control. And your whole business, right, as you've gone step by step, and you know, it's because it's so logistically heavy and intense, you can't do it all yourself. It's impossible for you to do it. So how did you find that? How did you find giving over control, like to the chef, right, that just said he wanted to do it his way, he didn't care about your recipes. How do you sort of conquer that or get over that hurdle of not being in total control?
Yeah. Okay. So that's very interesting. There's definitely a few components. One is I'm not a chef by training. Like I get hired sometimes and I do cookbooks and I'm sort of considered a vegan chef, but I'm not a chef by training. I'm a business person. I think that helps a lot because I never wanted to stay in the kitchen. I think that if you have a person who's a chef or a therapist or a whatever, and then they start a business, that's very difficult to hand off because the actual artistry, right? The actual like doing of the thing is part of who you are. So that makes it easier. When I look at it as a business and not as the thing itself, that made it much easier. The other thing is I read a book early on when I started this business called The E-Myth. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
So it's the Entrepreneur Myth. So very good. I recommend anyone to read it. And basically he talks about just that, where he talks about you're not working for your business, or you're not working in your business, you're working for your business. So that's why very early on it was, I'm not doing this thing myself. I'm not the business. I'm working for the business, and everything I do is going to be someone else's job. So having that mentality each step of the way, and it's basically, as soon as I realize I'm the bottleneck, and as soon as I realize I'm not enjoying this piece anymore, it's time for me to pass it on. The truth is, part of the problem, I'm part of the problem in terms of I'm like a jack of all trades. So while I was in business school, I also studied graphic design and web design, because I knew one day I was going to start a business and I wanted to build my website myself, right? And I know how to do the cooking, so I started the cooking here. Like I know how to do a lot of things. I do all the social media and create the social media content and the business pieces. So that is part of the problem, because I know how to do the things, but I do keep trying to remind myself, I'm not enjoying this piece anymore, or I can hire someone that's better than me. I'm the bottleneck. That's when I realize, okay, it's time to move on.
Wow, that's great.
For example, I also brought on a year ago an operations manager. Like, I hated dealing with all the logistics. That's not, I'm an entrepreneur, which I have big ideas and I want to do big things. I'm not a details person. So right away it was like, okay, I need to find someone that's very good at executing and getting things done. And I hired someone who's been in the food industry for many, many, many years. And he's running the kitchen and the deliveries and the customer service and all those pieces.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, your self-awareness is really almost inspiring. You're speaking, we get a lot of people on the show, but what you're really telling is the bare bones and the true obstacles that people have, right? I was told once when I first came to Israel and I was looking for work, I met with like an employment counselor or something like that, right? And he told me, you're a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I was offended when I heard that, because I thought being a jack of all trades is fantastic. What do you mean? Like, I'm so talented. But I learned later on that you just can't possibly, there's only 24 hours in a day. You can't do everything. But it's still a struggle that a lot of entrepreneurs have, is giving up control is not an easy thing for people to do.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Going back, so you mentioned you came from a family, right? A business family. You sort of knew that you wanted to be, at some point, that you were going to take the plunge and become an entrepreneur? Or?
Yeah, I did. And I started when I was in high school. I worked in business. I had, from 14 years old, I've been interning. My family was very modern Orthodox, and I had started becoming more religious on my own. And I think that freaked my mom out a little bit. So she was basically like, when everyone was going to Israel for the summer in 10th grade, she was like, you could go, but the rest of the summer you're interning. Okay. Like, you have to start interning. So I started already from there. So that actually was great, because it gave me the tools to start.
Wow. So you came to it already with a background, but when you decided to take the plunge, and even to this day, what do you sort of view is your biggest challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is now knowing how to move to the next level. Like, each time I get to a place, I realize I don't know enough. So I either have to learn it or bring on someone better than me, like I mentioned before. And I would say that is the biggest challenge, and that's where I am now. Like, we're growing, and we're growing all the time, but because my vision is not to stay this small business. Like, I want this to become, this big brand and big business. I am getting to a point where I don't know how to move to the next level. And that's constantly a challenge. So learning and pushing to the next level, and it hurts. Like, it's very painful, because you realize, like, wow, I don't know enough. And now I have to level up.
Right. Well, that's pretty amazing. Last question. I could speak to you for a long, long time, but we'll keep it. This is really, really interesting. Maybe we'll bring you on again. For those out there who are watching you and sort of, who have the bug, and want to start their own businesses, and now have been inspired by you and about to sort of take the plunge, what's one tip that you have for them?
Yeah. Okay. One tip. That's hard.
You can give 6 if you want. We can keep
it to one. What would be the major one?
1 or 2 tips. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting that you call it a bug because like when I was in HiTech and working, it was like I would listen to podcasts like this one, right? So startup or how I built this or things like that while I was driving to Jerusalem. I worked in Intel Jerusalem. And it was a bug because it was all the time I'd have ideas. Okay, this thing and China's now opening up. How we're going to get into China and Africa's new interesting. It was all the time. It's really a bug. And sometimes it can be very overwhelming also when you can't actualize it because it's like all the time ideas. So I would say I'm going to give two, but they're like two connected major ones. So one would be write down your ideas, like when you're driving to work or when you're in the shower or when you wake up in the middle of the night. Real life story,
Right.
real experiences of what happens to me. But like when you have those ideas, write them down in somewhere where you'll be able to find it because those are all potential. And those ideas might actually exist somewhere. I not to get to like whatever, but I do believe now more and more I read about it and it's coming up more in the business world. Many times when we get inspired by ideas, it's almost, whether you're religious or not, it's almost spiritual. It's almost like prophetic. And definitely writing those down because they're not just ideas. They're really something that could be something one day. And when you finally get the opportunity, you'll be happy to have that list so that you'd be able to actually start working on one of those things. That's one piece. And the second thing is once you do decide actually to take the plunge, you decide to go on one of those ideas. I really do believe in, again, we mentioned Lean Startup, definitely read that book for sure, but building on an MVP in the most simplest way possible, whether it's a TikTok page or an Instagram page or a mini website on Wix, like WhatsApp group or a Google Forms, like whatever the idea is, to build it in the simplest, cheapest, fastest way so you could start testing it as if it's something anyone would be interested in. Because many times we have good ideas and it's never the thing that you think it is. It's going to be something else. It's going to get a mind of its own. But starting in that way, you'll start collecting customer feedback and you'll start be able to like get the ball rolling.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. How can people, A, get in touch with you, and B, order meals?
Yeah, sure. So we have a website. It's www.veggitout.com. I assume we're going to include it in the
Yeah, I'm going to put all these things on the notes of the show.
So amazing. And we're also on Instagram. You can message me there directly. It's also Veggitout on Instagram. Yeah.
Well, Bayla, thanks so much. This was fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
You've been tuning in to the Aaron Katzman Show. We speak about your life, your money, and your investments. Be sure to hit the like button both on the YouTube page and on the podcast. And if you've not yet done so, I can't understand why, but if you've not yet done so, please subscribe to the podcast and, of course, to the YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll speak to you soon.